Tonight we're talking about garlic and ginger production in Mzansi, what the landscape looks like, what farmers are producing, how much are we producing compared to, the rest of Africa and globally. So I'd like to just start with the round of introductions from my speakers. I'm going to give us over to Ika Premier. I just wanted to find out more about your farming journey, where it all started. I said earlier that I'm sure that you've had this question asked a few times already since you started farming, but maybe just if you can indulge us that might not know you more about where you farm, how you farm, and more about your commodity. Thanks.
Hi, Dawn. It's nice to hear your voice again. Thank you for the introduction. I am a ginger hydroponic farmer from Lutrichard side, Limpopo, and I farm ginger hydroponically with my dad and my mom as well. So I'm very lucky to have a strong team. Yeah, we are focusing on sustainable farming and improvement of quality and doing less damage to the environment, basically.
Thanks, Ika. And whenever I tell people, at least the people that I've mentioned the specific session to about you farming with ginger hydroponically, everyone was really excited. And it's such a pleasure to have both a father and daughter in the space. So I'm going to give over to Bram next. Bram Cronier is obviously your dad. Thank you for having him, join you on this platform and for introducing me to him as well. Bram, it's so great to have you here. Maybe you can tell us more about your farming journey. Because I think Ika mentioned that she grew up, I guess, on your farm and then she automatically didn't go into agriculture but came there later in life. What does your farming journey look like and where did it all start for you?
So my wife actually farmed with avocados in the early 90s and in Levubu. I was running some businesses, but I always had one foot on the farm because I love farming. And a few years ago, we had a chance to start our small operation here in Lutrichard, where Ika is also involved. So Ika grew up on a farm for sure, but I think that might be part of a start of a journey.
Thanks, Bram. It's great to have you with me, and I'm looking forward to picking your brain when it comes to all things ginger. My favorite economist is in the space with me. Lunati Hlakanyane, agricultural economist. Thank you so much for being here. You do a lot more than just, that. So I want to ask you just to tell us more about you. You were a bookworm, I know that, growing up. And that somehow led you into this space. For those that might want to read more on his story, you can definitely go to Food for Mzansi for that. Thanks for being here, Lunati.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lunati Hlakanyane, a certified bookworm, as Dawn has mentioned. But apart from that, I am an agricultural economist. I started my farming journey, if I may call it that, at the University of Stellenbosch, where I studied agricultural economics from undergraduate to master's level, and specifically majoring in agribusiness. Yeah, but apart from that, I am also a co-founder of an agri-tech startup called Abelusi, which in essence seeks to use farmers' data to enable them to achieve, a whole range of commercial outcomes. But in a nutshell, I think that's pretty much me.
Thanks so much, Lunati. And I must remember to add that to your title when I introduce you the next time. And then my last speaker is Andrew, to him as AJ. He is from Genova Farms SA, growing garlic, cabbage, spinach, and tomato. Andrew, welcome. Maybe more about you, where your journey started, and more about your farming business. Thanks.
My name is Andrew Muganya. We own a farm called Genova in Magaliesburg, and we do garlic, do cabbage, spinach, and tomato. So it's mixed vegetable farming. We're still farming part-time, so one leg in corporate and the other leg in the farming space. By profession, I am in the IT space. I'm a group chief information officer for an NGO in Centurion that deals with health interventions supporting the Department of National Health in the AIDS, TB, HIV space, including circumcision. The farming interest has always been in me. Growing up in the remote parts of Zimbabwe, subsistence farming was always part of me, including looking after cattle and goats. Hence, at the farm, I hope to do veggies and have a bit of goats and also cattle.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And it's such a pleasure to have you here. And I should remember to introduce you to my colleagues at Health for Mzansi, seeing that you wear that hat too. our sister publication at Food Boom Zanzi. It would be great to feature you and find out more about what you guys are doing in that space. But back to our topic for tonight, which is garlic and ginger. I think I'm going to go back to Lenathi to maybe, give us a short overview of the demand for garlic and ginger and how that has kind of changed in South Africa over the past decade. I'd like to maybe just kind of set the scene with that. During COVID, there was a high demand for these two commodities, and everyone kind of wanted to get their hands on it, and it was very high value. Does it still have that same type of thing around it, or what is the landscape actually looking like at the moment? Thanks, Lenathi. Lenathi, are you still with us? Just to unmute your microphone. Perhaps he's having some trouble with his connectivity. Maybe Ika or Bram, if you guys could take this one to shed some light on it. I'm not sure how long you've been producing this commodity specifically, but if you could just touch on what you've observed.
Yeah, the COVID thing blew the ginger market in the public sphere because of all the prices. And there were even some instances where they were looking at price fixing and so on. So that is all past now. And this beginning of this year, we had a big slump in the market. I think it was going for 70 Rand a box for 5 kilograms of ginger. At the moment, it's going for 60 to 70 Rand a kilogram. So it's a very up and down market for us at the moment. We haven't been in the market for a long time. But garlic and ginger has imports from China every year. That's what all the market agents tells us. And we've seen some of the product on the Johannesburg fresh produce market. So we have competition from China, especially in this market.
Review. Andrew, your comments on it?
Yes, I think I can agree with Bram. So I think the garlic space faces a similar sort of context. I think before, the garlic and ginger was thriving here in South Africa until there was this sort of flooding of our local market with imported ginger and garlic, and the prices sort of plummeted. There was a slight spike during the COVID time when there was not enough imports or flow of goods from outside. The garlic was also affected, creating a spike in the price to a point where I hear some of the farmers almost sold their seeds as well because the prices were good. I think post-COVID, we have gone back to sort of a normalization in terms of the pricing. The garlic at the market is currently fetching around 60 to 70 kilo, maybe based on the type of cultivar. I certainly do the Egyptian pink, and that's the going price at the moment. A couple of observations on the garlic space is that the imported garlic, from an aesthetics point of view, it looks pretty, it looks big. However, on comparison, when you talk to people that do gourmet sort of dishes, they favor our local organically produced garlic versus the Chinese one. But obviously, to an ordinary person that uses garlic, if they go into a shop and on the same shelf you have the local garlic and the imported one, they always go for the imported one because it's big, bright, and it looks clean. That's been my observation within the garlic space.
As a follow-up question, Andrew, how does one know what you're picking up in the store? Is there something that you can look out for? How do I kind of know if this is an imported product or if it's a locally produced garlic?
If the packaging has not been destroyed, you'll be able to see on the label, because I think imports are supposed to be clearly labeled where they are manufactured and all that. But generally, the Chinese one is big and is very clean. It looks like it's been washed with some acid. I'm not so sure what kind of chemical they use for cleaning it. Our local one, you'll see it's a bit rough, and comparatively, especially the Egyptian pink, doesn't grow that big. It's small to medium size with medium-sized cloves. It's more pungent than the import one. That's been the feedback from the restaurants that do gourmet dishes. Mostly in the Italian space, in the Indian cuisine as well.
Thanks, Andrew, for just shedding some light on that, and also speaking from a consumer perspective as well when you go into the store, what to look out for and how to kind of determine that. Let's talk about the primary regions where ginger is grown, and then I'll move over to garlic. Ika, maybe you can give us some context for that, although I think your production might not really be as impacted, thing that you're doing it hydroponically, right? So kind of thinking about where the best locations is for the cultivation of ginger. If you can give us some context for that. Thanks, Eka.
So the primary ginger growing regions in South Africa would be KwaZulu-Natal, close to Durban, Louis Trichardt area, Limpopo, where we are based, and then Mpumalanga, Hazy View area. So ginger prefers a hot climate, humid climate, and you need a lot of water to grow ginger, since as soon as temperatures rise above 28 degrees, you need to cool ginger down with an overhead irrigation so the sun doesn't burn the leaves. There is this one guy, Wouter, farming ginger hydroponically in Cape Town, and he does it very well. He starts off with seedlings, however. He doesn't plant seeds directly into bags like we do with our hydroponics. He first cultivates seedlings and then replants those seedlings. So the things that you do need with ginger is you need a hot temperature, and ideally that would be around 28 degrees. You need a lot of water for your overhead irrigation to cool ginger down if your temperatures do go above 28. And the soil needs to be very airable so that ginger can easily set out inside the soil. So if you've got a lot of compacted soil, the ginger will grow in weird shapes. It will be deformed because it has to push out almost like a carrot. It needs to, grow out inside the soil. So yeah, those are some of the things that you need to consider before even thinking about planting ginger.
Thanks, Eka. Is it the same for you, Andrew, in terms of garlic?
What we have observed with garlic is that I think you get the best when you do the proper timing when you plant the garlic. So ideally from March, I think, to May, especially for the warmer areas like in the northwest where we are. I suppose for different parts of the country, there might be a slight difference in terms of the timing. But certainly when the temperatures are anywhere between 13 and 24, you can then start the garlic. So for our area, it's around March up until May, when we then can prepare the garlic, do land preparation, and then grow the seeds. It's ideal for what observed. I think it's ideal for the crop or the plant to reach the winter time when it has germinated and it's almost at a height of around 8 to 10 centimeters. Then it thrives through winter, and then it starts to grow on the other side of winter. Then it matures, and ideally takes about, I think, 6 to 7 months, especially the type of cultivar that we're growing, that's the Egyptian pink. So certainly it does need warm temperatures, but pretty much where you can grow onion, garlic thrives as well.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I'm not sure if this is something that I can ask you, but is there also a possibility to grow it hydroponically? Because even just hearing about growing ginger hydroponically is something very new to me.
I think it's possible. Remember, the hydroponic side is an alternative, and the feasibility as well. For garlic, yes, I think that would be possible. I don't think it's difficult. I've certainly seen, having Googled and YouTubed a lot, I've seen a lot of videos where there's alternative ways of growing garlic, and certainly the hydroponic way is also featured in some of the YouTube videos.
Thanks, Andrew. I think I want to bring Bram into the conversation just to talk about some of the challenges faced by ginger farmers specifically, and if we can talk about garlic as well, because I think you're familiar with both commodities and also, how to kind of overcome these challenges.
For ginger farmers, the biggest challenge is to get a healthy crop, especially if you grow it in soil. There's a lot of nematodes and stuff that can attack your crop, and that leads to you using lots of pesticides. So if you do it hydroponically, then you have other challenges. You need to be able to make sure that you give the right feed, that you don't have any fungi and so on. Ika can talk more about that. And it's expensive. It's very expensive to start off. So those are the major challenges for ginger farmers. Pests, not so much in the hydroponic things, but if you farm in the soil, you need to know your story.
Thanks, Bram. And I was actually hoping to also get Wouter into the conversation. I think you might be struggling with connectivity. But Eka, maybe you can just comment on some of the points that your father raised in terms of the pest or the challenges. You mentioned fungi being one of them. What has your experience been to date?
With ginger, pests that would attack your crop would be things like worms, mostly. It would be wireworms, bollworms, and cutworms, of course, in the start of your crop. If you plant in the soil, nematodes would be a very big problem. So nematodes deform the crop as well, and they attack the roots. So then nutrition is not taken up very well. I'm not sure about garlic all that much, but I think the funguses would more or less be the same with ginger and garlic. So your biggest problems would be like Phytophthora and Fusarium, things that are always active in the soil that you need to prevent your crop from getting. So with hydroponics, it's a bit more easily manageable because you can sanitize quicker. Your microbe environment is easier to manage. So we try and do a lot with microorganisms and predators so that we can prevent the diseases from starting off from the start. And we even do predators with the worms as well. So we use very little chemical products, which is a very nice turn from, planting tomatoes and using a lot of chemicals. So I think if planting in the soil, your chemical input would be a lot higher regarding your startup. Even ginger and garlic would be the same cost, I think, more or less. But with ginger, what makes it nice with the hydroponics is that you can optimize growth in your bags. And I think the same would count for garlic. Although garlic needs a much bigger space, you need a lot more crop, I think, planting crop, especially to make money if you compare it to ginger.
Thanks, Eka. And I'd maybe like to get into some of the costing for it, but I want to get Andrew just to comment on what you're saying around space, and then also to talk about the challenges that he's faced in his farming operation when it comes to producing garlic. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, so specific, for example, to our area, we don't have a lot of challenges in terms of the diseases as yet, but we always read around some of the diseases and the kind of regular checks that we need to do on our plants. So we do at various spots do uproot the plants to look at the health of the roots, the stems, and also to look at whether the bulbs are developing. And wherever we pick up issues, I think there's a disease called the rust something, or the one that the fungi that affects the bulbs. Sometimes it does. They say it stays underground for years and years, and it pops up whenever you're growing garlic. In the area where I am at the moment, I think it's very virgin, and we have not seen a lot of diseases. The advantage, I think, for our area is that the garlic is not liked by lots of animals. Like, they don't graze it as they do with other vegetables like spinach or cabbage. We've got monkeys, we've got porcupines, we've got kudus. So we have all those animals sometimes loitering in the night, but I think for the smell, they don't actually eat the garlic leaves. So I think safe to say that it's important to do constant checks, spot checks on the plant to see that it's growing well. We have not used any chemicals on our field. We rely on cattle manure and chicken manure as feed for the plant. So we do cattle manure as the basal, and then we then top up with the chicken manure for high nitrogen content. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Great insights, and it actually in part answers my next question in terms of the innovative or sustainable farming practices being adopted by both yourself and Eka and Bram. In terms of your production to promote environmental conservation. So you've in part already answered my question. Is there other things that you do that's towards this more sustainable farming practices when it comes to your production?
Yes. So I think added to that, we try as much as possible to shy away from any sort of synthetic or chemical fertilizers. So we are on our third cycle now with the garlic, and with our innovative ways, we have seen an improvement in the bulb size from where we started, and certainly with the intervention of like adding, creating the loamy effect on the soil by mixing it with mulch, and also, making our own compost to the best of our ability. So we get dead leaves and bark and some dead trees. So we then create a compost, and then out of it we get the compost and spread it on the beds. It's a bit slow because, like my other colleagues said, that the garlic will need a bigger space, like a sort of a hectare, for you to start seeing sizable monies coming in. So it's a slow exercise, but for what it's worth, I think it's an interesting journey where you actually see the fruits of employing environmentally friendly methods in farming. And we certainly see that in the areas where we then don't grow garlic, because we do a bit of rotation, you can see a thriving vegetation growing, which means that our farming method would not have killed all the nutrients in the soil. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And I guess, Ika, what you and your dad and your mom are doing automatically means, that you're farming sustainably, the fact that you're growing it hydroponically. But maybe you can just speak about what opted you to kind of go that route in the first place, and what would you say to kind of encourage others to take that on as a start if they're looking to kind of start with ginger or garlic, and then first, trying just to do it in a more sustainable way. Thanks. Bram or Eka?
I
Okay,
actually think my dad should answer this.
Okay.
I'll give it a go. I'll start with the substrate that we're using is sawdust, and it's a byproduct from a sawmill not very far from us, and we get the product for free, but we have to pay for the loading and for the transport, obviously. And once we used it for 1 year, we compost it in heaps, and our neighbor that's farming with fruit trees, he comes and collects it and he spreads it around his trees. So we recycling pretty much all our substrates. The other thing is the water usage. We're not using a lot of water like a commercial farmer on a soil that's planted in soil. So we can pretty much tune our water usage just right, so that we don't use too much. We have a little bit of wastage, but not that much. So and then obviously on the pesticides, we try to spray only for worms, and fungus. We use fungus in the root systems to keep Phytophthora out, and Fusarium and so on. I don't know if Ika wants to add anything.
Thanks so much. Ika, any comments from your side?
Yeah, the benefit of growing hydroponically is that your farming is more intensive, so your focus on per crop that you grow is more, so your yield per crop is higher. So you can give a plant specifically what they need and minimize your wastage of it. And as planting in soil, a farmer to grow organically it's not an easy task. It takes a lot of time. You've got to build up your soil, you've got to compost, you've got all that added stuff to get onto. And making money, making a profit with organic farming is very, very difficult. It's not an easy task. So growing hydroponically, it makes it easier, because in soil, you're giving fertilizer maybe, and that fertilizer will leach out a lot of the actual components of the fertilizer, and it will influence your soil health. If you give a pesticide or you give or you put any chemicals through your drip system, it will also go into your soil and it will influence the soil health in turn. Whereas in hydroponics, it's more manageable that you can keep it concentrated to a certain area and prevent your environment from getting that damage from all the chemicals and the fertilizers and so on. So what prompted us to start with hydroponics was that we have a very small planting space. We've only got a few, 3 hectares available planting space. So we did crop rotation with spinach and cabbage and peppers and tomatoes. And, you've got to plant something different every time to prevent diseases in your next crop. But we eventually ran out of space. So it was my dad's bright idea to start with hydroponics. And he started testing it with a very simple system with 2 tanks that mixed with pool pumps and used a pressure pump to just pump it out to one block, putting it on a tech timer so that it would pump, let's say, 8 times a day. So starting off with a very simple, small system like that, getting to know hydroponics, starting to learn how does the plants need, how do we need to feed the plants, how regularly do they need to get water, how much water do you need to give. So I would say start off on a very, very small space and learn your lessons on a small space, because if you're going to start out big, you're going to pay massive school fees. We've already paid massive school fees and we don't even have a space that big, even on the small space that we started with. And also rely on your specialists in your area, rely on your fertilizer specialist, on your microorganism specialist, on your chemical specialist. Let them advise you on what your plants need and what the best way for you is to give it to them.
Thanks, Ika. And I think that's something that many farmers reiterate over and over again. And I don't think that the people who are new into the industry or developing in the industry can hear it enough. So thanks for just reminding us of that. Lunati seems to have a little bit more stable connectivity. So I really want to bring him into the conversation. And I think maybe just keeping in mind what everybody has commented on, sharing the experience, maybe you can just pick up on the points that they shared, Lunati, and also just share your take on these 2 commodities specifically. Thanks.
Well, great stuff. Thanks, Dawn, and deep apologies to everyone. Load shedding is, it carries a heavy cost. But in any case, I think, when you look at these 2 commodities, right? 3 years ago, in the height of the pandemic, I think we can all remember the haze and the sort of the hype around ginger and around ginger as well, around ginger and garlic, and I certainly hope that someone did speak on the prices, because what's happened with ginger ever since is that the prices have drastically plummeted. I think in the peak of the pandemic, prices were going for as high as like 300 rand per kg, and as recently as the past week, I think I don't remember which one between the 2 specifically, but they had dropped to as low as 20 rands per kg. So that tells you that the market is it's not really at sort of like where it was before, right? And but that does not necessarily imply that demand is not there. Demand is still there, but it's just that we don't have all of those sort of push factors that we had during the pandemic, because as you might recall, a lot of people were either making their own alcohol concoctions with ginger, or just basically using it as a to sort of treat COVID symptoms. And the true, of course, and the same is true for garlic as well. And sort of all of those factors sort of had a significant impact on the prices, and a lot of farmers actually flooded the market, and they all thought that ginger or garlic was the new sort of gold, and so what that did to the market is that there were a lot of suppliers, and from basic economics, you will know that as soon as you flood the market with suppliers, the prices sort of go down. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. And not only that, obviously, like I mentioned, prices are not as favorable as they were. And again, as with everything, you should always interpret these kinds of data with a pinch of salt. There are a lot of moving parts. And so, from a production perspective, I think there will always be a sort of stable, sort of healthy market to serve. But again, I mean, I like what was mentioned here around how, you should always proceed with caution, as you will most likely burn your fingers if you just go, into it head first. So it's always prudent to study the market, look at what the signals are telling you, and then proceed accordingly, right? So so I think that's sort of like my 2 cents on this. I'm so sad that I didn't have the entire hour to sort of to give as much insights as I would have wanted to. I had connectivity issues, but yeah, I mean that's basically my synthesis of my thoughts around the viability of these two commodities.
Yeah, thanks, Lunati. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and I think it was, many of these aspects were mentioned by both Bram, Ika, and Andrew as we went into the conversation. And please, no need to apologize. It's one of those things, and I think everyone on the space kind of forgives each other for any connectivity struggles that we do have. But I think it is still very valuable, and I'm so happy to have still had you be part of the conversation. We are maybe going to go like 5 minutes over, if everyone will bear with me, because I do want to focus on if we can go back to more primary production aspects, best time for planting, what happens during the harvesting process, post-harvest, the storing of both these commodities. I think I'm going to start with Andrew again, and then I'll go back to Ika after that. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, yeah. So, like I said at the beginning, I think overall, in my area, the planting season it's more end of February up to end of May. Obviously, you also then have then comes winter. There's sort of a lull in the growth, but garlic does not need, for what I've observed, garlic does not need a lot of water. We moved from sprinklers because there was a lot of wastage in water, and we now using the drip system. It saves a lot of water and also a lot of energy in water. With the load shedding, the schedules are very erratic. They might actually disorganize you from an irrigation routine point of view. And the garlic grows, it matures after between 6 to 8 months. So around around October, we then start harvesting. Obviously, in between the planting and the harvesting, there is weeding, and the weeding is largely manual, so as not to disturb the bulbs. So one has to be careful when we are doing weeding. And then when it comes to harvesting, I think there's a simple rule that gives us that the garlic is almost mature. Ideally, it's got about I think 6 leaves. So I think it's 6 on the side and 6 on the side. And when it's mature, you would have seen that the bottom half, the leaves would have wilted or dried, and you're left with the 3 at the top. And then we start doing spot checks in terms of checking whether the bulbs have matured. That's around October, because the timing is so important. If you miss the timing by a week, you can actually lose the garlic, because it then starts losing the outer skin, and in the end you have garlic that has the cloves sort of showing without the cover. So the timing is quite important. We then at harvesting, we water a bit. and so that we can pull it out, and then we dust off the soil, and then we hang it under an open shade where there is proper air circulation. That's our storage. And the advantage with this type of cultivar is that you can keep it under that storage for over 6 months. That's the shelf life. What I'm not so sure is whether the method of farming has got an influence on the shelf life. That's something that we have not checked, but certainly when we harvest in October, we then start selling maybe in January, when the garlic is now dry, is no longer moist, is now dry, and then all the way up to July, we'll be selling. Soon after the 6th, 7th month, then the bulbs start wilting. They start losing a lot of water. They start rotting. So yeah, that's what I can say with my experience with garlic.
Thanks, Andrew. Really great timelines, very clear points. So thank you so much for that. Just one question: is it very labor intensive? So you said that you obviously have to be very careful with the weeding. Maybe if you can just respond to that one question, and then I'll move over to the ginger aspect with Eka. Thanks.
I think the labor comes in at specific times. So previously with the sprinkler system, it means that you would have then weeds growing everywhere, and you then need to do a lot of weeding. Now with the drip system, you minimize the weeds that grow around the plant. So certainly it doesn't become that labor intensive, but certainly land preparation, planting, and then regular watering, and then weeding here and there, and then maybe application of the manure, and then at harvesting. So it's not that labor intensive from what I've observed. As compared
Thanks, Andrew.
to yes, as compared to some of the crops that we have in the field. If you look at your spinach, your tomatoes, comparatively, with garlic, it's a breeze.
Okay. I get you. Thanks so much for that comparison, Andrew. Ika, if you could just run through your processes in terms of timelines. Does farming it hydroponically have the same kind of timelines? If you could just give a little bit of clarity on that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the timelines are more or less the same because so ginger works with a photo type. It's a phototype plant, so it works. It grows with sunlight, with light exposure, and temperature. So ginger you would plant in springtime, usually around end of August, September around, and it would grow throughout summer and will start dying off in around May. So when the light exposure gets less and your days start getting to 12 hours, 11 hours sunlight, and your temperatures drop below 18 degrees, that's when ginger plant starts dying off. And if you do leave it in the soil, it'll start growing again in spring. So it goes dormant in the winter time. So we harvest, you can start harvesting young ginger around February, March, usually March, but then your yield per plant would be less than you would wait for a mature plant, and the shelf life is a lot shorter with young ginger because it loses a lot of moisture. So then we would, with planting, we plant about 100-gram pieces in our bags, and guys in the field plant smaller pieces. They would plant about they plant closer together, but they would plant smaller pieces, about 80 grams a piece. So then when we harvest with hydroponics, we switch off the water for the plants around mid-May. So the sawdust that we plant in would dry out and it would be easy to clean the ginger. So we take out the ginger from the bags and clean it off the sawdust with water, and then cut off the remaining roots and pieces that doesn't look very good. In the soil, they would use spit forks to take out the ginger and it has to go through an intensive cleaning process because to get off all the dirt and get it out of the nooks and crannies from the ginger. So the cleaning process with hydroponics is a lot faster and cheaper than it is with soil planting. So with storage of ginger, we are not 100% sure yet. So farmers that plant in the soil would leave their ginger in the soil until it, they've got to harvest and send to market or sell it. So we are planning on just storing the bags underneath a big storage unit that we are currently building. So it still needs to be tested. We can't say for sure that it will work, but we're hoping that it will. Just leaving the ginger in the bags, in the sawdust, underneath the roof in a cool area until we need to harvest. So ginger is very sensitive to cold temperatures. You cannot store it below 10 degrees, then it will start to get cold damage. So they would prefer a bit more heat than that, and the storage also needs to be quite humid.
Thanks so much, Ika. I'm pushing a bit for time, so I'm going to ask for like 2 more minutes. And I'm going to ask Lunati just to talk a little bit more on, I think we spoke briefly on this already, but just for those that may have missed it, of market trends, and then also if there's any export opportunities for South Africa when it comes to garlic and ginger, producers. Obviously, a lot of the market is being flooded, like we spoke about earlier. The South African market is being flooded, with products from China. But why is it? Is it because it's cheaper? Are we just not producing enough? What is that? If you can just give us some clarity on that. Thanks, Lunati.
Thanks, Don. I think I only caught nuggets of what you were saying, but I'm gonna do my best to try to answer it. I think I caught the synthesis of sort of the crux of it. So export wise, right? I think our biggest market as South Africa is Africa, right? And so a lot of like our produce goes to the continent. However, in terms of imports, sadly, some of the other commodities that come from other countries, they flood our market, and what that does in essence is that it often undercuts our local farmers or producers, which then puts them at a very precarious position, right? Their margins they get severely diminished. I don't have the data at the top of my mind, but another economist recently reported on this, I think on Business Day, and where they essentially reported that there's been a slight decrease. I think the figure was probably just north of 0.5 to 1.5%, but please take this with a grain of salt. You can do your own research. There was a slight decrease in the proportion of garlic not garlic per se, the proportion of ginger that we were exporting to the European and Far East, the Middle East, as well as the Asian markets. And so I think there are a lot of factors that may possibly be a main contributor to that, right? I think all of us are quite aware of the economic difficulties in the country. Load shedding is obviously a big hindrance and the most obvious, but there are other added pressures that are, making it incredibly difficult for farmers to produce at levels that at levels that are sort of optimal, and so I don't want to just pin that down to sort of demand factors. There are other macroeconomic pressures that may be acting on that, right? So I think again back to what I said initially around how if you plan to produce either garlic or ginger, it is highly advisable that you look at what's happening macroeconomically, and not just within the agri space, but you have to For example, observe what's happening with the war in Ukraine and Russia. What impact will it have on fertilizer prices, for example? What impact will it have on other inputs as well, right? And there's a lot of changes, especially at the legislative level around water rights, etc. What impact will that have on your farming operation? So all of those factors have to feed into the equation that ultimately will give you a sense of not only to go into the space, but if you will, to what extent, right? I mean, it's I would like highly advise any potential farmers or perhaps any potential entrants into garlic and ginger production to sort of have that canvas at the back of their mind before they get into the space, because you will sadly, as with everything in anything in agriculture, you are working against a lot of a lot of external factors, and so you have to factor all of those into your production equation. Otherwise, you're just going to be working backwards, and then you'll likely you will likely fail as a consequence. So that's pretty much it, Don. Thanks.
Thanks, Lunati. Thanks for kind of giving us that sound advice and very realistic about, whether you should consider it and if you're willing to diversify and you want to look into it. You've given us a very clear, plan and thought process around it. So thanks for that, Lunati. I'm going to ask my other three speakers just to leave us with like one, piece of advice, to aspiring ginger or garlic farmers who want to start their own production, or they want to diversify, or they just want to, kind of play around with it if that's something that you can afford. Let's hear from the farmers that are producing these crops. I'm going to start with Bram and then Eka, and then the last speaker can be Andrew. Thanks, Bram.
Thanks, Don. So the last piece of advice that I can give is to grow your own seed with garlic and ginger. So you don't need to buy a lot of seeds when you want to start off. Just grow your own seeds for one season, and then the next season you'll have enough to plant at scale. Thanks. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah, it has been great. Thank you so much. Eka, your last comment. Thanks.
Thanks, Dawn. Thank you for inviting us to speak on this. It's been a lot of fun. I would say, if you want to start off, I totally agree with Bram as to grow your own seed and, start small. Start small on your own scalable operation and scale it as you grow bigger. And if you want to try hydroponics, I highly suggest it. It's a lot of fun and it saves on a lot of cost at the end of the day.
Definitely. I think people are really excited about that aspect. So I'm sure they'll be connecting with you one way or another, Eka, and maybe even Wouter, if I get him back to talk more on this and invite you both again to my podcast. Well, you've been there, but Wouter hasn't. So maybe after that, you'll also get a few calls. And he's in Cape Town, so I can also pester him for information. Andrew,
do that.
I will, definitely. Andrew, your last and final comments, also just advice to others in the sector. Thanks.
Yes, I think, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think my last point as a matter of emphasis is start small, like my other colleagues have said.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You've given us great insights. I think I'm going to invite you back to either talk about spinach or tomatoes in the future. Thank you to all of my speakers. I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. We're going to be focusing on women farmers, topics when it comes to women in agriculture, the role they play, bridging the gender gap within agriculture education, for example, is one of the topics I'll be focusing on. I'm just looking forward to, over the next few weeks, celebrating women in the sector. You guys know I'm all for it. So this is my chance to go all out and, not have to make any excuses for it. But yeah, thank you so much for all of my speakers and for being here and for sticking with me throughout. Thank you, Lunati. But yeah, I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. And then also for those who are in the Centurion area, Food from Zanzi will be hosting an event on Women's Day. Do go and check out our socials. I'll be co-hosting this event. It's called Hat and Heels. So I'm looking forward to wearing my heels, although I might fall on them. But yeah, I think that will be great. So if you are in the area, go and get a ticket. It'll be fun. It'll be great to engage with the women farmers in that area and in South Africa. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the evening. Enjoy it, and bye for now.